Hi friends, it's Mr. Alex from Adams Memorial Library, and it's time to make this month's themed craft, a fly-catching frog. That doubles as a game as well. Now, in order to make this frog, we're going to need just a few things, and you can come right here to the library, either at our children's room desk or our curbside pickup, to get your very own craft kit. But if you can't make it into the library, that's okay too, because you can follow along with supplies from home. Now, as I mentioned, there's just a few things that we're going to need, so let me show you what those are, and we'll get started. In order to make our fly-catching frog, there are quite a few supplies that we're going to need. The base of our frog is going to be a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube cut in half. Then we have some green paper for our frog's body, some red paper for our frog's mouth, some white cardstock for the fly, a paper clip, 2 wiggle eyes, some red yarn, and then we'll also need a hole punch, scissors, a stapler, glue, and pencils or crayons to trace and decorate with. So let's go ahead and gather all of that up, and then we can get hopping making our frog. The first step in making our fly-catching frog is that we're going to take our green sheet of paper and trim part of it to be the same length as our tube. And I've already gone ahead and done that, but you might want to grab your pair of scissors and trim yours now. Once you have that done, we're going to take our glue and we're just going to apply some glue to our paper, and that way it will stick to our tube. And then we're going to take our tube and roll it up into the paper to cover the entire outside. So we'll just add a little bit of glue, and we don't want too much because we don't want our paper to become soggy, but we do want it to stay on the tube. So we'll just add a little bit like this. Then take our tube and attach everything. It's up to you if you want to cut your paper short or just roll it around the tube multiple times like I'm doing, whichever works. But at the end, we just want to apply some pressure to hold the glue in place and seal everything off. At this point, we should have our tube covered in our green paper. Now, our next step is going to be to add the frog's mouth, and we're going to do just about the same thing. We're going to cut a strip of our red paper, and I like it to be about this long because we are going to decorate the inside of the tube like our frog's mouth. Now, it doesn't need to extend the whole way down the tube, but just enough that it covers what you can see from the front of the tube. And again, we're just going to take our glue and apply it to our paper and roll it on the inside. Now, of note, something that we want to be careful about, and this can be a little bit messy, is that in this case, we were able to roll our tube onto our paper, but in this case, we're actually going to have to roll our paper and insert it into the tube. So something that you might want to do is figure out which size your roll of paper needs to be. And once you have a good size, you can take your stapler and staple that off so that it stays the exact same size. So I'm going to do that now. And just staple our paper like this. Now we can apply our glue to the outside of the roll and insert it into our tube. And as I mentioned, this part can get a little bit messy. So you definitely want to make sure that if you're working on a surface that can't get glue on it, that you put something down first. But now that our frog's mouth has all of our glue, we're just going to gently and as neatly as possible insert it into the end. And as you can see, some of the glue is getting on my hands. So we're just going to be very careful like that. Now, keep in mind that our glue will dry clear, so we don't need to worry about that. But we're going to go ahead and let this sit and dry before moving on to the next step of our project. Now, we've given our tube and the paper that we've glued onto and into it a little bit of time to dry. And you'll see that it hasn't dried completely clear yet. That generally happens overnight. But it has had some time to bond and become tacky and stick to the paper. So at this point, we are going to take and add our fly to our frog. And the first thing that we want to do is take the back end of our tube, the side that doesn't have our red paper, and we're just going to flatten it like this. And once we've flattened it, we can add a few staples to hold it in place, just like that. Now, the next step is going to be to add our yarn. And this, I think, is one of the trickiest parts. So be patient, and if you don't get it the first try, that is okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a hole with our hole punch into the back side of our frog, right by where we just stapled, just like that. Now, if you don't have a hole punch at home, you can use a pair of scissors or something else to make a hole, but I happen to think a hole punch is easiest, and I have one. So now the next step is going to be to insert our yarn into our tube. And this is the tricky part. Something that I found that really helps is to take a piece of masking tape, if you have one at home, or any other kind of tape, and tape off the end of our yarn, giving us something firm to grab onto. Unlike our yarn, which is soft and kind of wiggles around, the tape will be easier to hold on to. So then we are just going to gently, and you'll be able to see from the inside where the hole in your project is. Like, you can see a little bit of light shining through. And we're going to feed this yarn with our taped off end between the two layers of our tube and right down the middle. Like I said, this may take a few tries. My advice is to tape off your end so that your yarn is a little harder and easier to work with. Then feed it through the layers and take either carefully your scissors or your pencil and use it to feed the yarn through the other end. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And just like that, we now have our yarn fed through our tube. So at this point, we are going to go ahead and pull it almost the whole way through, leaving a little bit on the end to tie our project off. So we'll just feed the yarn through our hole again. And make a knot. When we do that, our yarn is going to be attached to our project. Now, you want to have a decent amount of string at the end of your project because that is what is going to be tied to your fly. So make sure to keep that in mind. But we'll go ahead and tie that off now. Just like that. So now we have a knot in one side of our project and our loose yarn on the other. We'll trim off the end, and it's time to make the other part of our game, our fly. So in order to make our fly, we're going to take our little white piece of cardstock and we're going to draw our fly. Something to keep in mind if you're going to play the game part of this is that your fly needs to be able to fit into your frog's mouth. So this piece of cardstock as it is way too big. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to fit this whole thing into my frog's mouth. So I want to draw a fly that is a little bit smaller than our frog's mouth, and then go ahead and cut that out. I suggest starting by drawing a shape that looks like this, sort of a W with a rounded top. Then, once we've cut this out, we can decorate the rest of our fly. And you can decorate your fly any way that you'd like. What I like to do is draw a head with some eyes and then shade in its wings. So that our fly looks a little something like this. Now we're going to take our hole punch and put a hole in our fly, just like that, so that we can tie the other side of our yarn through. Before you do so, you can cut off the taped end of your yarn. We won't be needing that anymore. And we'll feed it through our fly and attach that as well. Now, if you're going to play the game part of this project, your fly is not really going to weigh enough to play your game successfully. And it's going to make it really difficult, if not impossible. So in order to help us out, once we have our fly tied off, just like this, we're going to cut the end of our string, if we have one, and take our paper clip like this and add it to our fly, just like that. And that is going to give our fly a little bit of weight so that we can play a sort of ball and cup game where we take our fly and try to toss it into our frog's mouth. Now, as you can see, mine is a little bit long right now on the yarn. So if I don't like how long it is, then we can simply start over. I can go ahead and take our pair of scissors, cut the knot off, make our yarn a little bit shorter, and retie our fly and paper clip back on. You can keep experimenting like this, but remember to be very careful as you're cutting yarn off, because you can always make your yarn shorter, but you cannot make your yarn longer. So be really, really sure that you want to make your yarn shorter. If it's too short, it may not reach into your frog's mouth or the cup of your ball and cup game. So we're going to go ahead and give this length a try, tying off our fly. And we'll experiment to see how it works. And I think this is a pretty good length because I was able to get my fly right into my frog's mouth. So we can dump it back out, and our frog's body, tongue, and the fly are now done. The final step is to decorate our frog, because right now it just looks like a green tube. So in order to decorate our frog, we have one of the best craft inventions, wiggle eyes, and we're going to take those and glue them onto our frog's face. So we just need a dot of glue on each eye and place them on either side of our frog's head. Now keep in mind that the bottom of your wiggle eyes are flat and your tube is round or mostly round, so you may need to apply some pressure or hold them in place while the glue sets for a little bit, just for a minute or two, to make sure that your eyes stay on your frog. But once you have something that you're happy with, and I'm pretty happy with this here, then it's time for the final step, which is to add your frog's arms and legs. So in order to do that, I have the rest of our green paper that we had earlier, and I'm going to fold it in half so that we can create two arms and legs that are exactly the same. Then, from the point in which I've folded, I'm going to draw the arms and legs that I want to give my frog. And there's no template for this. There's no right or wrong. Your frog's arms and legs can look however you want. But I recommend drawing them sort of like this, with the arms a little bit shorter and the legs a little bit longer. Something like that. So we have this L shape with the frog's hand or foot on the end. Then we're going to take our scissors and go ahead and cut this out. And once we have our frog's arms and legs cut out and in place like this, then we're just going to flip over our frog, making sure not to disturb our wiggle eyes since they might not be fully attached. And we're just going to take our glue and attach these to the back of our frog. Now, as you can see, my frog's legs do not extend very far from its body, so I'm going to have to glue right on the edge of my project. If you want to be able to glue more toward the center, then you're going to want to make this part of your frog's arms and legs a lot longer. But that is entirely up to you. And once again, we're just going to hold these pieces in place for a little bit to allow the glue to bond before moving on to the next one. Now we'll glue on our arms, attaching them just exactly the same way. And once our frog's arms and legs have been attached, then our project is complete. we have one frog, one fly, and a game that we can play. So as I've sort of mentioned, the game that you can play is a sort of ball and cup game where you can take your frog and toss the fly up into the air, trying to catch it in the frog's mouth. It can be pretty tricky, so definitely be patient. And again, if you find out that you can't quite manage to get the fly into the frog's mouth, then you may need to adjust the length of your string. But this is one good-looking frog, and I think that our craft is complete. Well, friends, I had so much fun making our fly-catching frogs, but I'd like to see how your frog turned out, and if you're able to catch the fly in your frog's mouth. If you can't at first, that's okay. It definitely took me a lot of tries to do it successfully, but once you do, be sure to send those pictures on over to us at kids@adamslib.org. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for updates not only about our themed crafts, but everything else that we're doing here at the library. And as always, happy crafting, everybody.